Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And as always, we'll start with some news. And last week looked like it was going to be a slow week for news. That is until yesterday when CCP dropped the latest dev blog on the resources in EVE Online. And it was quite a controversial dev blog, quite a few people very unhappy. CCP even decided to add a live stream on their Twitch channel after that to explain things a little bit, try to do a little bit of a Q&A, although they apparently are forced to keep quite a few of their plans secret, even from the CSM, which is why all of this feels like it is being forced upon the player base a little bit. I am planning to make an extra video just about this after I give myself a little bit more time to digest everything and perhaps even to speculate on CCP's future plans. But if we try and talk about it in a nutshell, it's basically a further reduction of the availability of mineral resources across the board, and then an added big change is that high-sec, low-sec and null-sec will basically have a single or at least one mineral that they will become the sole producers of. So for instance, titanium will become something that only high-sec can produce. I think it is isogen that goes into low-sec, and in nullsec we have Zydrine and I think some other stuff that will become unique to them. But the plan is that no type of space will be self-reliant anymore. It will force trade and all of that stuff. And the reduction, in my opinion, is aimed at something that I've been speculating on a little bit during EVE Talk, but was kind of confirmed during the live stream after CCP stream on Talking in Stations, is that they also want to tackle just the massive stocks and reserves of mineral that are still available in the game. They want that depletion to continue. They want to force those big alliances that are holding these massive stocks to use them up, so that the destruction of ships become more impactful for everyone, and which I think is a big part of the frustration. Most of what I've seen is, well, in my opinion, players complaining about the fact that there's less and less of a throwaway meta that they can find. Some players apparently, the way they want to see EVE is that losing a battleship, losing a cruiser is, completely inconsequential, because in just a couple of minutes of Rorcal mining, basically they've made up for that loss. And so that is something that CCP is clearly pulling away from, and they want to make loss more consequential. That's my read on it. CCP, that's maybe something that I should mention as well, is that the CSM didn't know any of this beforehand. CCP doesn't want to have anything leaked, and in fact all they said is, this is probably like the worst that it's gonna get, or close to the worst that it's gonna get when it comes to resource availability. But all of this is part of a longer term plan that they have envisioned, and some players and some viewers may call me naive here, but I actually believe them. I do think that they have plans for expanding resource options, but in a way that will be quite different from just static belts anomalies and things like that. In fact, during the live stream itself, I heard one of the CCP guys mention that they have stuff ready that they could deploy right now, but they feel like we have to go through this resource crunch before they can actually open up the spigots again, basically. Yeah, quite eventful, and of course potentially a very big impact on the market. But before we go there, as always, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store, see if there's anything special here. And well, we have the Zento Isideko skin, that combined skin that is front and center again for the Caldari ships, but no real sales or bundles or anything like that to view. So yeah, nothing special to report in the New Eden store this week. That means that we get to move on straight to the market, and as always we're going to start with plex and stuff, and that's going to be at around 4:30. Like that. Now also maybe one quick note, some of the numbers may not be completely up to date with the ticker because I had an unexpected interruption again. I'm actually making this one a few hours later than what I normally do, but let's jump in here with the price of plex. In GTA itself, 2.75 million up to almost 2.8 million for the sellers, 2.6 million for the buyers, and then if we go to the player owned trade hubs, we go down to just above 2.7 million, and the buyers are still a decent amount amount above 2.6 million. So as a result, very narrow margin, and here further hesitation with sometimes a slight uptick, but nothing too special in the plex market. My read on this is that the market doesn't really know where to go from here. Very narrow margin. There's sellers and there's buyers, but there's no one that's outright saying I'm gonna invest massively in plex because I'm expecting these prices to go up, and nobody's dumping them expecting a complete crash of the price either. I think this is very interesting because it is, in my opinion, also showing that at least the market believes that CCP is having a pretty big impact on botting. That was also something that was talked about a little bit in the live stream, and they mentioned that the price for ISK on illegal sites has gone up substantially, and so they're seeing that as a metric that their efforts are helping. I would say that this is also a bit of a part of this. If botting is rampant, ISK becomes worthless, and these prices tend to go back up. And the fact that this is not happening despite the fact that summer is over and that there is a war, a big war raging in nullsec, it is quite surprising to see next to no movement in plex itself, and that really shows quite a bit of hesitation and perhaps also just a counterbalance in something that has usually helped with inflation, which is of course botting ISK, that all of that is being stifled quite heavily at the moment by CCP. If we take a look at the multiple pilot train certificates next, this is basically the same picture, flat after a slight bump due to that Omega sale time, Omega time sale, I should say, that happened right here. So that's here as well. That temporarily really increased demand for plex, but that has been absorbed, and now we're back in that hesitation phase. You can see the same thing here, and a train certificate going for almost 1.4 billion, decent amount below that, and almost 1.3 billion for the buyers, and the margin is very thin in my opinion. 1.366, almost 1.37 million, let's say, for the cheapest seller, and then the buyers 1.28. That is a very narrow margin for something that costs 1.3 billion ISK. Next up, we have our skill extractors, which of course follow plex very closely. You have that same bump despite the fact that you don't have the volume bump. This just shows if something happens to plex, it happens to the skill extractors as well. And then we have that same hesitation throughout the month of September, where we are currently at 304 million ISK for the cheapest seller and 298 million for the buyer. Again, that really narrow margin, showing that no side of the trades at the moment is dominating, is very confident in the positions that they are taking. Let's take a look at the impact on the injectors next. Here are the large scale injectors, and this does come as a little bit of surprise to me personally. We actually have a decline on the chart back below 700 million for the average price. Just above 700 million for the sellers, 674 for the buyers. So really the only explanation here is that buyers have begun to say we're expecting lower prices, SP not that important anymore, and they've been able to pull the sellers down a little bit as well. That are still trying to hold on to 700 million, but I'm not sure that they will succeed in holding on to that for very long. Very interesting and kind of unexpected to see this pullback all of a sudden in the large scale injectors. Next up, we have the small scale injectors. Let's take a look at that chart. All right, still moving a little bit differently, but basically predicting what would happen in the large scale injectors, as we have this slow and steady move down on the 5-day moving average throughout September for the small scale injectors, selling for 141 million, buyers at 132. Again, bit of margin opening up here because the buyers just aren't upping their prices. Next up, we have our daily alpha injectors that are again doing the exact opposite. This is also somewhat surprising to me, but it is clearly showing these daily alpha injectors to be their unique market, their own segment that is not tied as closely to the large scale injectors as what you might think. They're back up in price. They're heading back for 40 million, which is actually a good average for most of the year. Compared that to the chart of the multiple pilot trading certificate, the large scale injector, that was usually at above 800 million ISK and is now diving back down to less than 700 million. That's clearly quite a loss over the last year, and here we have a much more stable performer currently selling for 39 million, not even that much in availability, and buyers forced up to 36 million. I find that very interesting. Alpha players wanting those skill injectors seems to still be quite a big hit, and supplies diving down means that whoever does decide to go on that trade actually gets a decent amount of ISK for that. Finally, we've got the hypercores that are also back down after a bit of a bump up above 300,000 disk, 290,000 for the sellers, 270 for the buyers. That's back on that 280,000 range, which I think is decently normal for the item and for, well, normal player activity, I would say. So no real sign that the end of the summer has really bumped up the numbers that much. I think basically the war raging and at least preparing to rage for most of the summer has already brought back a lot of players. The real life situation, of course, with the pandemic is also causing a higher number of players to already be in the game, and so that's why perhaps that impact is not so clear. Let's move on to the minerals. I'm sure some of you guys have been waiting for that at 1050. And let's take a look at the impact. So first of all, we have Tritanium. Here is the chart, and we were doing really well last week, already getting back above 8 ISK for the average. But here, of course, on the announcement of the dev block, today's average jumps up between 9 and 10 ISK. Sellers are coming in at, let's take a quick look at JITA to make sure, well, Tranquility Trading Tower is actually going up here as well. 950, a little bit above that for most sellers, going up to 970 very quickly, 975 here, and then we actually have quite a few sellers that have tried to pump the price up above 10 ISK, going towards 11 ISK very quickly. Buyers forced to follow the movement here, 860 almost for the buyers, showing that at the moment there is a bit of panic, a little bit of hoarding happening, of course. I think especially for whoever wants to build ships in nullsec and things like that, any relatively cheap Tritanium that they can still get their hands on will be picked up very quickly. And well, it must be said, this is nothing too crazy, because right here in April we already had 10 ISK for Tritanium on some market panic as well. So so far, honestly, I thought we would perhaps see an even bigger jump in the price of Tritanium than we have seen here. But this is the drought period, and this could become like the worst part of it starting half October. We do get a bit of warning here, so I'm sure that miners will be going crazy trying to set up stocks for the minerals that will no longer be available in the spaces that they reside in, and this is part of the equation. Very expensive Tritanium, of course. 9.5 ISK, that's an incredible price for those high-sec miners. Must be rather rewarding to see that for whoever has been holding on to it even longer than I did. Next up here we've got Pyrite, and Pyrite also jumping up, but again 7 ISK on the average for the chart here today. We've been towards 8 ISK before, so this is not completely outlandish yet either. And we're talking 726 for the sellers in JITA, 672 for the buyers. So that clearly shows that there is a bit stronger demand here as well. But as I've said in the introduction, I feel like what my theory on especially Pyrite and Isogen has kind of been confirmed during some of those nullsec guys talking on talking stations. There are just huge stocks of the inverted minerals, I'm gonna call them, that are still out there, and that are basically keeping this price from increasing the same way Tritanium, Mixalon and Noxium are. And this is Pyrite and Isogen. Pyrite is now going for 7 ISK, Tritanium is going for almost 10 ISK, and Pyrite used to be more expensive than Tritanium. Isogen used to be more expensive than Mixalon, and so that is a situation that still hasn't reversed. And I'm kind of curious, right? CCP said, maybe this is the worst that it's gonna get for the resource availability. I would say there's two possible metrics that they're looking at. It's the stocks that are still in the hands of players, and do they slowly get used up? Are they going to force all of that into other goods, manufactured goods, and then those can eventually be destroyed and things like that? Or are they also looking at this very specific metric, Pyrite? How long is it going to take for Pyrite to increase in price to be back above Tritanium? Because if I'm not mistaken, per cubic meters of ore, you're always going to get way more Tritanium than you're going to get Pyrite. And so I don't know, of course, but if that's a metric, then this drought phase may not be over yet, because then Pyrite and Isogen will have quite a ways to go before we reach that. But I feel like I've been vindicated looking at all of these reactions. The reason Pyrite and Isogen have this chart a chart like this is because there are still huge reserves out there, not because supply and demand are actually in line at the moment with the availability. Next up here we've got the Mexalon chart that also moves up, but you know, again, not another 1 year high point that was above 100 ISK. Right now we're talking about, well, 96 ISK for the sellers, 86.50 for the buyers. And if I'm not mistaken, I didn't see Mexalon becoming an item unique to one of the spaces. It's always been somewhat of a bottleneck in nullsec, but clearly this 1 year chart is lovely for whoever loves to mine, of course. Starts at 40 and now ends at like 95 ISK for the sellers. Very good times, and it just confirms again, if you're mining to sell right now, obviously Mexalon and Titanium are a big part of your focus. And then an Isogen, which used to be more expensive than Mexalon. Well, you can see where we start the year at here at 15 ISK, then we make our way to 20, 25. We're starting to lose a little bit of that, and here is the big impact Isogen becoming a mineral that will be unique to low sec, so that will be very difficult to get those in any meaningful numbers without taking risks. Up to 42 ISK today for the average price. That's the big jump, and in fact it is 51.10 for the sellers, 36.05 for the buyers. Still a pretty healthy margin between those two. And this may, in my opinion, be a little bit too much too quickly. I do think that there's reserves in the hands of speculators as well, not just big nullsec groups that just are planning to hold on to them until they need it to build more ships. But there's going to be speculators as well that are going to take advantage of this price. And so I do expect a little bit of a pullback here, but longer term, in October, when that change hits TQ and when Isogen will have to be mined from low sec, it is going to be very interesting. And in fact, I could see this one overtake Mexalon once again. We'll see if that happens or not. Next up, we've got Noxium, also one that was clearly a worry for a lot of players, because if I'm not mistaken, Noxium would become not unique to low sec, but definitely the vast majority of it should be coming from low sec. Availability in other spaces will be down quite substantially, and this is of course something that we've rarely seen before. Such gains in such a short amount of time. We started the year at 250. Here we have a little bit of jitters, as CCP said, we're gonna go in a resource crunch, guys. That was like probably here December, January, but eventually it also hit the Noxium market. My TRA again, stockpile starting to deplete. But then surprisingly, we've been able to hold on and even go down slightly in price after that. What range is this? 320 ISK, and then it started right here in July. I think here we hit the real bottlenecks. In fact, this was also confirmed by one industrialist from a nullsec group, that right now Noxium is his real problem, and that's only gonna get worse, of course. So we then jumped up to 500 ISK. After that we jumped up towards 600 ISK, and then here we had a jump to 690, above 750, and now we have the dev blog jump above 1000 ISK all of a sudden. Jesus Christ, 1200 ISK practically for the sellers of Noxium, 866.7 for the buyers. That's just, again, a really big jump and quite a healthy margin between sellers and buyers at the moment. So don't expect this to just, stay afloat on this range, although, with enough ISK flowing in from nullsec alliances, for instance, it could happen. I do see a little bit of a pullback happen after this, as people will, especially speculators, jump to liquidate now and try to find other uses for their ISK. But this is, of course, making for quite a year, from 250 to 1200 ISK. That is making Noxium a late bloomer, but also pretty much the big winner right here. Very, very substantial. 1200 ISK for Noxium. I think we haven't seen that in a hugely long time, although, if I'm not mistaken, it is not historically unprecedented. I do think we've seen Noxium in the 1100 range before for decent periods of time as well. So this is a super interesting jump that is basically them predicting pandemonium in the supplies of Noxium, and that is going to be a real problem for everyone. I basically sold a lot of my stocks just a little bit too early. Damn it, CCP, you keep squeezing this, and I honestly didn't expect it. Otherwise I would have, of course, held on to most of my stocks. After that, we have the former or soon to be back really Nosik minerals. Here is the Zydrine chart that also jumps back up, but also in a more muted way. We've been here before. Basically, we've had a daily average price of 1360 before. Now Zydrine goes up to 1330 is pretty much for the sellers, 1300 for the buyers though. That is showing some worry again on the demand side of things. Zydrine above 1300. Again, not unprecedented, definitely very expensive. And then we have Megasite that remains the oddball out. This one that used to be more expensive than Zydrine as well continues to decline as everything else is being bought up in a feeding frenzy to create stockpiles for this next shock. 478 for the sellers, 465 for the buyers of Megasite. Basically just maybe 10%, 20% above where it started the year at. Compare that to Zydrine, that almost triples. Yeah, it's quite a bit from tripling actually, but it's you know, definitely not just 20% increase. And then Noxium, of course, that yeah, what would that be? 5 times, four times the price all of a sudden. That is quite a big move. And there is one thing that I do, you know, not worry, but wonder what will happen is you do have some of these very big stockholders, of course, in big alliances, in traders, and in things like that are trying to use that perhaps as a buffer and saying, well, we're gonna keep losses pretty much meaningless because we've got these huge stocks, and if I lose my Dreadnought tomorrow, I get a new one because I know my guy in the alliance who has minerals to make hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They actually never really gave us any real indication on how big their stocks are. Pretty smart of them, of course. But can you still trust all of those guys to not sell their Noxium, not sell their Zydrine, not sell their Isogen at these incredible prices all of a sudden? You know, I think with the return of worth of minerals and items and things like that, what we could see actually is more backstabbing again, more spying, more betrayal in the game as well. Because honestly, if I'd be sitting at huge stocks of Noxium that I've gathered and bought for 250 ISK, and I'm looking at the market right now, I could really fatten up my wallet quite a little bit. So it is going to be interesting. I personally am all for that one stated goal, making loss meaningful in EVE Online again. Let's move on to the PI market, coming in at 2240. So here, of course, the way I'm reading this is lots and lots of risk flowing into the mineral market all of a sudden. So I'm not expecting good news for everything else. In fact, if you've taken a look at the numbers for the last month, what we're seeing is you could see it as inflation, but definitely the price index for minerals is going up. Price index for Tech 1 chips is going up as a result, but everything else is declining substantially. We basically have deflation in a lot of the other stuff, and that is basically what we've also been seeing for PI. Here are the broadcast nodes that managed to make their way back to 2 million, but yeah, it doesn't last too long. We're back towards 1.9 million for the sellers, although most of them are super close to 2 million, 1.9 million for the buyers as well. Bit of pressure on that basically at the tail end. And here is what I was kind of worried about, or thinking that would happen indeed, is construction blocks, which normally 12k, I think 12.5k would be a normal price. Well, this is that deflation in action. A full year of average price of 10,000 is for construction blocks, and we are back below that. First seller at 9,900, 9,300 for the buyers, and just look at the lack of demand, very clearly shown in the lack of buy orders. Consumer electronics, also something that normally 12.5k and even higher. It's actually a pretty one of the more expensive, in my opinion, refined PI materials, and most consistently expensive, I would say, PI materials. But this year, yeah, again, very bad year. 10,000 ISK, we're trying to land on that. 10,500, one buyer at 10,000. But look at that again. Look at the demand just shrinking. The ISK just isn't there to flow into PI at the moment. Now we get our biggest losers actually over the last half year. All fuel related PI materials have been hammered substantially. Here are the coolants, 12,500, which I would say is actually even above its normal average, but now crashed down to less than 9k and is trying to get back to 10,000, but not succeeding. 9.9 for the sellers, 9,500 for the buyers. Lots of pressure, and it's not letting up. Cryoprotectant Solutions though is continuing to increase in price. I find this very interesting. I'm gonna read this as slight speculation as well on Cryoprotectant Solutions being needed more for more implant sets. 140,000 for the sellers, 123,000 for the buyers, and I'm actually gonna drink a little bit because my throat is a little bit dry. There we go, still just water. As we move on to our enriched uranium, tied to fuels, but okay, there is some exception to the rule, of course. That has to happen every single EVE talk. You see the same pattern, tied to fuels, decently strong first half of the year, and then getting hammered down to 10,000 disc and even 9,000 disc on a couple of days. But right here at the tail end, we all of a sudden see a resurgence, almost 13,000 for the sellers and 12,000 for the buyers. That's quite some nice demand. This is pretty impressive and back on that normal average range for enriched uranium. Okay, surprise winner here all of a sudden with this good. Integrity response drones able to defend that 2 million range, which is pretty impressive. 2.2 million for the sellers, 2 million for the buyers is also quite reasonable. Then we have our mechanical parts, stays flat at 10,000 disc, which honestly is not that bad a price, but considering how all the other fuel-related PI materials had done in the first half of the year, this was not doing that well. 10,400 for the sellers, almost 10,000 for the buyers. It's actually okay as well, not as dramatic as, let's say, the first 4 or 5 products. Nanites is flat at that 6,000 N range, I think, 6.2 for the sellers, 6,100 for the buyers. Again, considering this bump here in April, just like with the Cryoprotectant Solutions, what you can expect from this is that it is tied to implants, and I honestly would be looking for lower prices before I try to buy these. Nanofactories next, late jump and able to stay well above a million ISK as well. 1.2 for the sellers, almost 1.2 for the buyers. All right, showing some more demand in some goods all of a sudden. This is very good news, a little bit unexpected after I saw what was happening in the mineral market. But okay, some of them able to maintain their gains quite well. Organic mortar applicators though had like 2 weeks of being able to go for around a million ISK, back down to 900,000. And what's the reason? It's this right here, demand just leaving the PI market back down to less than 800,000 ISK for organic mortar applicators. So this was basically at the moment looking like it could be a full strap. Anyone that started to keep investing at that 1 million range will now feel rather silly, because you're looking at quite a bit of a loss. Recursive computing module, same thing, managed to get back up above 1.5 million, which was the average for the year, but the pressure is back. 1.4 million for the sellers, 1.3 million for the buyers, and again, look at the lack of buyers that is creating this downwards momentum. Robotics was doing really badly and is confirming the trend again, back down to a 1-year low point, 75,000 disc. That's a quarter of the price below what we're used to. 78,000 for the sellers and 73,000 for the buyers. So again, look at how much I can browse for the sellers, and then the buyers. Yeah, this is it. So it's a lack of demand, and I think with all of that attention going to Minerals Tech 1, all the ISK that is gonna flow in there just to keep things alive, we may be in for more bad times actually for PI, now that I think about it. Self-harmonizing power cores, right, went back to 2 million, had to slowly give up those gains, and then in the last week crashing back down substantially. Less than 1.8 for the sellers, less than 1.7 million for the buyers. Sterile conduits, all right, another except. There are some exceptions, I must admit that. Here is sterile conduits, 1.3 million, the high end of the range. That's where the sellers are at. Buyers, couple buyers, well, a decent amount actually, coming in at 1.2 million. Yeah, this is risky in my opinion, but it is happening. Yukomi superconductors also slowly trending away from that 50k mark, which I would love to see to buy. So 90,000 for the sellers, 78,500 for the buyers is a little bit too high for me. And then finally we get the wetware mainframes. Yeah, normally well above 2 million, and right now 1.84 million for the sellers. So again, also well below average at the moment. So that's the PI market. Quite a bit of depression. Quite a few of them just don't have the demand to make any gains in the prices, and there are some exceptions to those rules who are managing to somehow maintain those average prices. But yeah, with all the action, as I've said, happening in the mineral market and the focus on those resources, I personally do think that we may be in for even lower prices on all of those as well. Next up, advanced moon materials, 3050. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do a bit more. There we go. Actually had a family visit, so I already spent a decent amount of time talking, and we're still talking, but let's go. As always, we'll start with we'll start with the carbonites, and crystalline carbonite last week did really well to get back towards 1 year high point, up above 160, gives back some of that ground right now. 153 for the sellers, 153 for the buyers, very narrow margin and slightly above average, so pretty good performance here so far. I'll try to take a look at the other carbides here first. That's gonna be titanium carbide next. Pretty much flat, slightly below average, similar price to crystalline carbonite though. 156 for the sellers, 154 for the buyers, also a narrowing of the margin there. Then we have our 3.1 Fernite carbide for Minmatar. Here we do see some volatility, a second peak all of a sudden, back up towards that 200 disc almost. No, 166 for the sellers, 155 for the buyers. Clearly a lack of demand as well. Okay, so I'm kind of surprised by this volatility. Look at this volatility, look at this volatility here. Oops, excuse me, on this one. Very welcome, because I actually added advanced movements to try to do some trading, which was very difficult lately, but this is stemming me hopeful. The real question to me is this because of the war? Is this because Minmatar ships are in the meta and you know, hacks and things like that require this very specific material, or is this because of the fall of Niaja? And is it that, you know, suppliers and buyers are having a tougher time meeting each other here, and that perhaps there is more business going on in Amar, in other trade hubs and things like that? Both of them are possible, and so that really is, in my opinion, the big question. If it's only because of the war, then after that one ends, you can expect a fallback and just, you know, a languishing on those lower prices for the foreseeable future. If it's the fall of Niaja though, then you could expect that volatility to continue, and that for traders and for transporters as well can be very, very lucrative. Finally, we get the tungsten carbide. That's up from a low point slightly. It is also, you know, on average the more expensive one. 186 for the sellers, 173 for the buyers. Let's take a look at the impact on the meta materials next. Where is my 1.2, there we go. Photonic metamaterials for Galente continuing to stay well below average, which is a bit of a surprise considering that we don't have that much of a loss after the peak here. So Galente like that, well below average, almost 14,000 for the sellers, but 13,400 for the buyers. Also again a very narrow margin. 2.2 for Caldari non-linear metamaterials, managing to claw its way back to that average price, showing again a bit of volatility. Buy for 19,000 disc, sell right now for 23,000. There's a bit of a trade to be done there. 21,000 for the sellers as well, and especially, you know, buy in another trade hub where perhaps they're oversupplied a little bit, transport that here, sell it here for this price. If that's what's happening, that could be very interesting and part of what CCP actually wants to see with the minerals as well. Then we have our plasmonic metamaterials slowly edging up here, I would say, considering what's happening here. This could be up for even more. Minlatar, god damn it, is that, can I edit this? Edit. Let's do some on the fly reparations here. It's starting to bother me that it said Minlatar here. So Minmatar, here we go, back up to that average 20,000 disc for the sellers, 18,000 for the buyers. Quite okay. I think it can potentially go higher as well, as the carbides are peaking at the moment. And then finally we get terahertz metamaterials. doing something completely different, diving down to a 1-year low point, which is for Amar production. Interesting. So tungsten carbide able to defend its average, and actually one of the more expensive carbides, and then the corresponding metamaterials very much at a low point, which again to me means that potentially for some reason JITA is oversupplied for these specific metamaterials. So you could imagine if you could buy these on the cheap and perhaps sell them at a much better price in another trade hub, that could be interesting. We'll see. If I find the time, I may look into that. We still have some other advanced MOOMATs to look at. Here is fermionic condensates, continuing that pressure. Unfortunately for the others, I'm expecting to not see good news. Yeah, 78,000, excuse me, for the sellers, 72,000 for the buyers. Ferrogel was at a 1-year low point, a little bit of opportunistic buying and a data point well above everything else. Let's take a quick look. No, 33,000 for the sellers, 31,000 for the buyers, still very much below average. Fullerite continuing to struggle as well, another 1-year low point. Buyers are below 700 ISK by quite a little bit. You could risk an investment in this, but it does feel like you may be catching a falling knife, just like right here. Hypersynaptic fibers, same struggle, well below 10,000 ISK. Nanotransistors, same struggle, 1-year low point. Phenolic composites, same struggle, bouncing off that 1500 range. Yeah, this is unfortunately the story. I think here a part of it is just ISK is not flowing into these goods anymore. It's a tough decision. I'm actually kind of tempted to, on some of those really pronounced 1-year low points, to maybe make or try an investment just like the people that bought right here. It's a bit of a gamble, but it could be very interesting. Next up, Tech 2 ships. Let's take a look at those. 3640. Like that. And well, let's see. Ooh, interesting. Basilisk jumps back up to 230 million. Yeah, the war is of course very potentially lucrative for traders in this. 221 million for the sellers, 201 for the buyers. And here I'll take a look at my holdings. Unfortunately, I don't hold a Basilisk, but this is a substantial jump. And honestly, from just 10 days ago, when you could have probably bought these for below 190, you already have a trade in hand right here. This is why I personally love the Tech 2 ships. Cerberus, slight jump, but nothing, you know, too major, nothing tradable, unfortunately. Let's see where the buyers are at. Still at below 200 million, 196 for the buyers, 216 for the sellers. They've basically gone up a little bit. Not enough volatility, but yeah, last week you could have definitely bought some cheap Cerberus. Then we've got the Guardian. Ooh, continuing to go down and now reaching a 1-year low point below 180 on the average price. 185 million for the sellers, 162 for the buyers. And know that I have invested, and I hope that that gives me an hour. I think so. Taking a quick look. 11, yes, ooh, okay, we still have an hour, we're good. Man, yeah, my schedule messed up a little bit and now it's not too easy, but Guardians, 1-year low point, and I considered 184 million investment worthy. You could undercut me by 20 million pretty easily at the moment. I may have to double down on that, but I'm not sure if I will. Still, Guardian, 1-year low point, definitely something worth looking into for a purchase. Then we've got the Hound, had a little bit of a bounce, but is already moving its way back down as well. 23 million for the sellers, 21.7 million for the buyers. I have some at 22.5. Hopefully we see another spike that goes a little bit higher at some point. The war could definitely do that. I think, you know, Basilisk, that's the war. So who knows when the others might spike. Ikitursa is back on that normal 400 million range for 14 for the sellers. Definitely not a lot of buyers at 374 here. It's a pretty small market, of course. And then the Ishtar is coming back up from that 1-year low point, reached almost 200 million for the average price. Buyers are still below that, 215 million for the sellers, but we probably have again a bit of a drying up of the sellers here, and so it's going to be harder and harder to buy that Ishtar for less than 200 million ISK. And so people that bought right here, I think in these couple of days, probably have the best deals. But it must be said, again, lots of attention for minerals for Tech 1, and so further depression of Tech 2 prices are not impossible. Manticore also stops its increase and is now at 27 million for the sellers, 23 million for the buyers. Munin, all right, I would have expected perhaps a move here as well after what we saw for advanced movement heroes, but it is still flat, very, very low. 188 for the sellers, 175 for the buyers. If you want to gamble on the war creating this again, it is the right time to buy a Munin. Do I have one? No, I don't. Nemesis, this was definitely tradable. 1 year low point went to 20 million, back up to 27.5 million. And I think I sold once or a couple somewhere, but didn't mark them. 25 million now for the sellers, 21 million for the buyers. Yeah, we're in that in-between spot. Too late to sell, too early to buy. Then we've got the Oneros continuing the further decline, 1 year low point. It's just not happening. Complete lack of demand, as you can see. 150 million for the buyers, 160 million for the sellers. Whoever still brings those to the market, don't really understand it, but okay. Then we have the Panther that is shooting up. Okay, we do have an explanation for that at this point. Of course, we have a dev blog that changed Edencom ships and the Black Ops battleships, so can't really use that well at the moment for a general production vibe. This is CCP intervention. 1.34 billion for the sellers, 1.14 billion for the buyers, and a complete lack of availability because, well, they are just being reworked, so whoever can fly them and wanted one probably pushed hard to buy them. Purifier is crawling out of the hole as well, went to a 1 year low point. I bought some for 22 million. Buyers are up to 23, sellers are up to 26. Unfortunately, looking at what happened to the Hound and what's happening with the Nemesis and the Manticore, I don't think we'll jump up to 30 plus, which is where I would love to sell. So I'll need a little bit of patience, but we're away from that buy opportunity again as well. Scimitar still struggling to make its way back up here. 180 million, 167 million for the buyers. By now, honestly, you should have one if you want a Scimitar for investment. Then we get the Widow, a little bit of a jump as well, but definitely less than the Panther. 1.2 billion for the sellers, almost a billion for the buyers, definitely on the cheaper side then. And then finally we've got the Zealot, which I'm holding one at 187 million and is currently flat at 223. Buyers are at 202. So a bit of a mixed picture here again as well in the Take 2 ships. A couple of them trying to research but not really able to play with high points at this time, and some of them just really crushing low points on oversupply or on a complete lack of demand, and as a result it creates opportunities. But of course, everything else that's happening in the game has its impact here as well, and I'm a little bit wary. I mean, I've got my investments and I'll be patient enough to wait for the right time to sell, but I don't think I'm willing to double down on Take 2 ships at the moment, because, well, if we have even more ISK and things like that flowing into Take 1, we could be in for some more deflation as well in Take 2 products. Let me take one quick look though. Do we need a Take 1 ship? If we go for industry, we do need some Take 1 stuff, some pyrite and things like that. So who knows, maybe those really low prices, like here this Guardian, like the Hound again, and then which other one did I see? Take 2 ships, there it is. Munin was really low as well. Guardian was really low. Even Oneros, again, another 1 year low point. Scimitar, who knows, perhaps these are real buy opportunities, because for industry, whoops, we have some minerals in the mix as well. So just saying, well, this is gonna deflate because all the ISK is gonna flow into minerals, it doesn't really hold up entirely, because yeah, those are part of the mix as well. So it's interesting. Could take a gamble. I personally am not willing to double down too much. Next up, Take 3 ships, 44 minutes. Like that, let's take a look at those. You guys know that I have a slightly too expensive Loki and Legion at the ready for that Take 3 gamble, but here's the Confessor going back up in price a little bit. That's interesting. 45 million for the sellers, almost 40 million for the buyers. We still have 139 of them here to keep things a little bit in check, and I personally think this could be due to the changes in the Abyss. I think Tech 3 destroyers, 2 of them can now run Abyssal sites as well, and of course I think their potential there is very, very high. Let's see what's happening with the Hecate. That one is still landing below 40 million ISK, almost 38 million for the sellers, 34 million for the buyers, and this availability is very much in line with the normal to slightly low range of price. Then we have the Jackdaw, flat as well, below 40 million, 38 for the sellers, 35 for the buyers, slightly more, but again, not hundreds of ships available here, half a page of new ships coming in. This feels in line with something that is slightly more expensive than the Hecate. And then we have the Zwepel is what I wanted to click. Also stabilizing at the same range here, 38 million for the sellers, 34 million for the buyers, and again, 6 sell orders in the last 24 hours, decent availability, but nothing completely outlandish. And so what may be happening? Well, the Confessor up on slightly better availability. Is this the ship that's being used in the Abyss at the moment? It is possible. Or is this purchase here because of a Nullsec Alliance deciding on an extra Confessor fleet? That is possible as well. I think the next weeks will then be rather interesting. Will the Confessor continue to be the oddball out here with a slightly more supply and also higher prices? Then I think the Abyss theory holds up. If it, on the other hand, either crashes down very quickly or starts to push these other prices up on lower availability, then I think a big purchase from an alliance or something like that is more likely. Next up, Tech 3 ships. Here is the Legion, flat. Really not much to say. I'm hoping that we get a takeoff from there, but it's a big gamble, I admit that. 139 for the sellers, 126 for the buyers. You're still able to buy well below 130, so that if you want to follow me on that gamble and to do even better than my own holdings, because I bought for 135, you definitely still can. Loki back under pressure as well, still below 150. 150 million for the sellers, 134 for the buyers. I bought mine for 150, which I thought was not a bad deal, but looks like I was too early on that as well. Next up here we've got the Proteus, also continuing that low burn. 141 million for the sellers, 126 for the buyers, still pretty cheap. And then the Tengu up a little bit from close to 1 year low point here, staying below 150, yeah, by quite a bit. 146 million for the sellers, 134 million for the buyers. And perhaps on Tech 3, especially the cruisers, I do want to mention that these were discussed a little bit in the live stream as well after the dev blog, because wormhole space, of course, doesn't get its own mineral, its own resource that it basically is able to monopolize. And I think CCP there mentioned that, well, they already have Tech 3 production, and perhaps they need to look at what can the Tech 3 ships bring to usability for players, not necessarily making them just better or stronger, but perhaps giving them some extra roles could be worth it. So, who knows how that is going to evolve, but that's basically the reason they said that that mining is basically getting completely dumpstered in wormhole space, at least regular mineral mining. I think even gas mining is going to take a little bit of a hit as well. It was mentioned there that this is about cleaning up wormhole space, taking lots of stuff away so they can put other stuff in there. And well, the reasoning is they have Tech 3 production, they have their unique thing already. Unfortunately for them, of course, Tech 3 ships, specifically the cruisers, are just not really that popular at the moment. And then finally, we are going to move to our extra products at 48.30. As I'm slowly losing my voice, but okay, we'll push through. Compressed ores, let's go. I think this ought to be it. And I'm mostly actually interested in some that I may know and could pretty easily produce. Let's start with compressed pyroxeres here. Let's take a look at that. Well, was already climbing, so we don't see like a super big jump up. But if I'm not mistaken, this holds Noxium. Not that much of it though, but it also holds Tritanium and Mixelon, so this is definitely not a bad one. And it's at a 1 year high point, starts the year well below 5k and is currently selling for 10,000 ISK. Where is our Veldspar? That's down here. Here is the compressed feldspar. That one did move on the dev block. Look at that volume. Starts here at 2000, low point is 1500 disk and is currently selling for 3000 to 3500 disk, bars up to almost 2800. Yeah, a lot of hoarding all of a sudden, of course. How are you going to get titanium to nullsec? Compressed feldspar is the answer. I kind of want to see the dense feldspar as well. Probably the best, most compressed source of titanium that you can get. Yeah, alright, volume wise, its availability is just a little bit less. And going for 3500 disk. Alright, compressed feldspar is just as expensive. Anything else? Umber, I think, was gonna be completely gutted. Compressed, yeah, volume wise this is not too good. Let's see if I can find the umber itself then. There we go. All right, not a big move on that one. Kernite at a 1 year high point. Slight, yeah, definitely a volume move here as well for Kernite. Starts at 10,000 disk and is now going for 60,000 disk availability. Gone. Everything has been bought up that was available for the compressed kernite. And if we take a quick look at what that produces, Mexalon and titanium. So it's not even the Noxium bubble right here, but this is just, you know, natural progression on the resource crunch that this became more and more expensive. I'm sure some of you guys will want to watch, would want to see some others, but look at this list. I can't really go over all of them. Here is compressed nice, also at a 1 year high point. Not really anything from the dev block to be spotted, but that's, I think, because its availability is already so bad. But yeah, starts below 110,000, now goes for 275, more than double the price. Feldspar. Take a look at compressed crocite here. Yeah, even on this one that was already at a 1 year high point, you still have that volume spike. And again, that 1 year that performance of the 1 year is pretty impressive. But I think in general we can already feel here. I can take a quick look at pure jaspet, 1 year high point. Definitely some volumes here as well. What does that produce? Let's take a quick look here. Yeah, there we go. Mexalon, Noxium, Zydrine. That is obviously also something that you want as much as possible of. So if we look for jaspet itself, there we go. There's the volume spike. There's the 1 year high point. And there is the, what would this range be? 35,000 to 100,000 ISK for compressed jaspet. So it's pretty obvious that there has been an impact on all of these. They're very expensive. Honestly, guys, if you don't use it yourself, compress it. I do think that that is very valuable at the moment. Compression itself is only going to become more and more valuable, as it's the best way to move some of these bottleneck and some of these unique minerals from the space they're produced in to any other space. And it is pretty obvious that titanium is a very big worry, because that's where you get that huge volume jump, that huge price jump all of a sudden as well. And it is because, as I've said before, titanium is a unique mineral in the sense that it is the bulkiest one, the hardest one to transport. And so this actually impacts titanium very majorly. Only HiSec will be able to produce it. And if you refine it, you make it very difficult to transport it. And so that together should mean very popular compressed feldspar, very popular, a pretty nice margin, I think, for compressing your ores. And the dynamic is going to change quite substantially. So this is gonna be very, very interesting to watch in the upcoming weeks, but especially when it actually hits DQ. Mid-October is what they're planning to do. And yeah, let's keep a close eye on what CCP actually announces. Hopefully they can give us some hints as to where they want to go. Yeah, I believe them when they say that they have a plan. So I'm willing to stick it out. My structures will keep going. In fact, I think some people are, taking advantage of all the moon mining that I'm doing, because this also was mentioned in the live stream. Yep, they're looking at the usage of those moon materials. And so building up stocks at the moment, while it looks like it's what CCP wants to fight, right? The old stocks that have been built, it's the natural response. If you want to take advantage of all these changes, is try to grab as much as you can right now, because the drought period is not over for mineral resources in EVE Online. That's it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.